Hello and welcome to the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast for October 31st, 2024. This is episode 309. Stand-up comedian, actor, improviser, and dreamer Paul Green coming to you, and happy Halloween to all of you. If you are a Halloween person, I hope you are enjoying your costume, your many festivities. If you have kids, I hope that your kids are happily sugared up and candied up, and that you just had an enjoyable holiday. I had an interesting Halloween myself. I was booked to perform in a costume Halloween show at Rick Bronson's House of Comedy. And not gonna lie, I was very apprehensive about how that was going to go. So if you're new to the podcast, first of all, welcome. And also, I'm sorry because I'm all over the place on this podcast. So this last weekend, I dressed up as Lord Voldemort, and I get hired to play this Lord Voldemort character at a large Harry Potter party up in northern Utah. And I sort of created my own iteration of the character, like kind of my own unique voice, my own attitude, which really has no resemblance to the Lord Voldemort in any of the movies, and probably definitely not the books. And pretty much all I do is I just walk around this large Harry Potter event, and I just make fun of people and their costumes, and I just am kind of snarky to them. So anyway, so this comedian friend of mine, Mary Upchurch, who is just crushing it right now. She's incredibly funny, very high energy. I met her here in Phoenix, but she moved to Vegas a couple years ago and is doing very well. But she got booked to headline Rick Bronson's House of Comedy up in North Phoenix. And she reached out to me and just said, "Hey, I'm doing this Halloween show. You know, is there anything that you can do, you know, in a costume, in a Halloween costume?" And I just said, well, you know, I do this Lord Voldemort character. I don't really have a stand-up routine for it, though. I just sort of walk around and riff with people. And I just said, you know, I guess I could try to, like, just riff with the crowd in that Lord Voldemort character and just see how it goes. And she was like, "Oh, that would be great. I would love that," right? And here's what's interesting is I almost said no. I was almost like, you know, I don't know how well this is going to go. You know, it's not really my thing. I mean, I do this Lord Voldemort thing, but it's not like that's what I want to be known for, is the guy who dresses up like Lord Voldemort and, you know, walks around and makes fun of people. But it's like, the other hand, it's like, well, I'm not booked that night. This is an opportunity to perform. It's not about me. Maybe there are some people who will show up, who will have a good time. And then also, just from a professional standpoint, I'm not really well connected at this comedy club. And it's a local comedy club, which is a club and an opportunity for me to perform. You know, to get booked at regularly if they start to see me or whatever. So it was just one of those situations to where, you know, sometimes you just say yes. Unless you just have a really, really solid reason to say no. And so I did. So I said, fine, I'll do it. So I went to the show tonight. I put on the old robe. Now, when I do the Lord Voldemort up in Salt Lake City, I actually hire a makeup artist. I buy this prosthetic mask that, the makeup artist literally glues to my face, and it has the flat nose and all of that stuff. So, and then she like airbrushes me. And I mean, it's like a pretty involved makeup job. It takes about 2 hours and it's pretty involved. So for this gig, it's like, well, I'm not dropping a couple $100 on a makeup job just to go, do this. So I went to Spirit Halloween and it was today. So the line was out the door. And I just bought some like white makeup. And I just kind of made myself a little ghosty. And threw on the robe, went up to the gig. And first thing that happens is I get there and they're like, well, we don't have a lot of people who purchase tickets, so we may cancel the show. So I'm already like, oh, geez. And I was already kind of fretting over what I was even going to do. Is this really going to work? Am I going to be able just to get up there and riff in this context and actually, be funny and have the audience have a good time? So anyway, now it's like, oh, well, the show might be canceled. Well, they ended up not canceling the show. And I was the first comic up after Mary, who was kind of running the show. So she started the show, did a set, and then brought me up. And what I told her, I was like, Mary, bring me up as Lord Voldemort roast comic. It's like, I want to make it very clear that my act is going to be roasting the audience. So I got up on stage and I just started riffing with the audience. I didn't really have any jokes. And I just saw who was out there, and it was a small audience, so it was easy to sort of pinpoint people. And really just started doing crowd work as my Lord Voldemort character. And as the crowd was, whatever their responses were, I was, just kind of like riffing and kind of being my obnoxious Lord Voldemort character self. Overall, I think it went pretty well. I was getting laughs. The audience seemed to be having a good time. She only had me up there for like 6 or 7 minutes, which was perfect. And so that was really cool. And then while I'm there, one of the other performers, I meet him, and turns out he happens to be the booker of Rick Brodson's House of Comedy. And I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? And we started talking, and I just said, well, cool, I can send you my avails. And he was like, yeah, follow me on Instagram and send me your avails. So just like that, I went from, do I even want to do this gig, to doing the gig, having it go well. I mean, it's not like I was slaying the room, but, they were having a lot of fun. And now the booker of the club at least knows who I am. And, knows that I can stand on stage and hold my own and whatnot. So overall, a successful show. Really glad I did it. And man, I'll tell you, it really does just speak to the importance of putting yourself out there as much as you can, whatever dream it is that you're pursuing. And I mean, because what's the alternative? The alternative is to stay home. Definitely nothing gonna happen there. Oh, and this is kind of an interesting side story that happened today. So today I was at lunch, and this guy walks in who I instantly recognize as a drummer. He used to be a drummer on the drum line of the same high school that I went to. Now, he was a little bit younger, but his older brother was on the drum line with me, and he ended up like just being an incredible percussionist and drummer. And as a matter of fact, he started the Phoenix Suns drum line like 20 years ago. He just got so good at drums that he just started like reaching out to places and just trying to find ways to, pick up gigs and to be a professional drummer. And so it was really interesting running into him. I mean, I haven't seen or talked to this guy in like 20 years, but like we noticed each other instantly, and he sat down and we chatted for like 30 minutes. And it was a really interesting conversation and really interesting to catch up with him, because he's a really hardworking, industrious guy. And I still remember when he started coming up through the drum line, like he instantly became one of the top like drummers. Like he was very focused, very dedicated, became very talented. And then he went on to play on the ASU drum line, which is like super competitive. And then he started getting hired to be like the drum instructor for different schools. And then he was doing this Phoenix Suns drum line. And he also was able to get endorsements from like big time drum companies, like drumstick companies. I think like maybe Vic Firth or Pearl, Zildjian, I think he said. And we had this really interesting conversation about art and economics, because, it can be so challenging as an artist to actually be able to make a living at it. And as far as where I'm at in my dream, that is one of the major components of this whole process that I'm really trying to figure out, which is, how do I not only make the economics work out, but how do I make the economics work out in a way that is very lucrative? And me and this, old buddy of mine, his name is Nathan, he talked about how, like, he would meet all of these drummers who were so talented, but they didn't really have the capacity to, like, network or, create opportunities or find ways to monetize their art. It was almost like, well, I'm just going to become an incredible drummer, and then, the world will reward me with money. And I wish it was that way. I wish it worked that way, but it just doesn't really seem to be how it plays out in the real world. It's not always the most talented artist who, makes all the money. It's usually the best networked or the best, or the most publicized, the best advertised, the most famous. And now that can be frustrating. That can be something to be mad at. Oh, well, why isn't the world different? And why isn't, like the most talented artists, just automatically gifted with millions and millions of dollars? Why is it that, only like the top sexiest pop musicians, well, they get to make hundreds of millions of dollars, but like the most talented, violinist, of the symphony, probably has another job or, has to like teach lessons to make ends meet. Matter of fact, this buddy of mine that we were talking to said that he ran into, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess up the story. He ran into a percussionist who I think plays percussion for the Phoenix Symphony, but he ran into him at a shoe store because the guy was selling him shoes, right? So it's like, if you're playing percussion in the Phoenix Symphony, you're a pretty darn good percussionist, right? So it's like, this guy is good enough to play percussion in a symphony, but to make ends meet, he has to be Al Bundy and sell shoes in a shoe store. So, listen, I don't know why the world is the way it is. I don't know why we value what we value and why we don't value other things. That's not my place. What I'm trying to do is figure out how to navigate how the world is and how to do so successfully. And, and if the reality is, it's not always, the best artist, quote unquote, who finds success. Well, then who is? And then how do I accomplish that and do so in a manner that still is honoring the art form? And it's not like I want to take the art form for granted or neglect it, but for me, the dream is to be successful at it. And anyway, that was just a really random meeting to run into this old buddy of mine who, again, haven't seen for, gosh, probably a good 20 years. And still recognized him instantly, and he recognized me instantly, and we were able to sit down and, chat it up and just have a cool, the conversation was actually inspirational. It was really cool talking to him and just to hear his perspective. And, for him, who was actually really successful as a drummer, and the reason he was so successful is because of how he networked and how he was willing to, reach out to major brands and, and to get sponsorships and, was totally fine calling, the Phoenix Suns, just saying, hey, I noticed you guys don't have a drum line. I'll put together a drum line for you. Let's talk, and now the Phoenix Suns have had a drum line for 20 plus years that he started. So really cool conversation, and, just a good reminder to me of how important networking is, how important showing up is, how important it is to, to reach out, to take opportunities when they come to you, to be open to opportunities. When a friend of mine reaches out and says, hey, do you want to come do a costume Halloween show? Even though it's not necessarily what I would have thought of doing and not necessarily, my wheelhouse of just being willing to go, cool, let's do it. Let's see what happens. And because I did that show, some connections were made, and I had another chance to do comedy. And after the show, a couple of the audience members came up and said, oh my gosh, you were really funny. Can we take our picture with you and all that? And, a little adulation always feels good. I have been told recently that I have a bit of an ego. So I do not mind that ego getting stroked every now and again. All right, everybody. So that is going to be it for this episode of the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast, October 31st, 2024, Halloween, episode 309. I hope you're all doing amazing. You're out there pursuing your dreams, finding joy and fulfillment in the journey, and that you're open to taking opportunities when presented to you, and that those opportunities are fulfilling and meaningful to you. All right, everybody. I love you all so much. I will talk to you tomorrow.